Happy Tuesday, everyone. So, this is officially my last episode of season 1, which is just so crazy to even say that I've been doing this for like 6 months now. I've been feeling a little nostalgic lately, so thank you to everyone who has listened, even if it was just for one episode of someone who you're a fan of. It all counts, and I absolutely loved every meaningful conversation that I've had. I'll be posting some throwback conversations on socials, but I'm already working on season 2, which is coming early next year. So enjoy your holidays, have a wonderful New Year's, and I cannot wait to see what else is to come in 2024. I'm really just so excited. In this episode, I interviewed Zoë François. Zoë is a pastry chef whom you may recognize from hosting Zoë Bakes on Magnolia Network, as a judge in Silo's baking competition on Magnolia Network. She just had a holiday special come out with the lovely Andrew Zimmern, who you all may know. So make sure to check that out. We chatted about her baking cookbooks, elaborate gingerbread houses, and pretty much everything else. So please join me in welcoming the wonderful Zoë François.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi, so great to see you again. I'm really excited because your and Annie's interview kind of just stuck out to me from a year and a half ago. So I'm super pumped to talk to you today.
Oh, terrific. Thank you. It's great to be here.
For some context for listeners, I interviewed Zoë over a year ago about Silo's baking competition, which was on Magnolia Network. It was like a 1-hour special at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's a whole big thing, which is very cool.
Yeah, that was the very first one.
Yeah,
so
I
fun.
do remember. Yeah, it looked really fun. And the winner of that competition was Annie Paul, who was actually my third guest on the podcast.
Oh, wow. She's awesome. I love Annie.
Oh, yeah, she's so amazing. I totally love talking to her. She was so great. In the beginning, she was like, what are we going to talk about for an hour? But we just breezed right through.
That's great.
So listeners, go back and listen to that episode if you haven't yet. I have so much awesome info on you from your website about your background, so I really would love to dive into that if you're up for it.
Yeah, sure.
Yay, okay. You have a lot of exciting projects from this year, but let's kind of pedal back a little bit. You grew up in Vermont. Mm-hmm. You started to bake for yourself when you were 8 or 9. Most of it was inedible, I read. Do you remember being drawn to the kitchen? Was this more of a curiosity or kind of both?
Well, so I grew up on a commune, and so a huge part of being on a commune is feeding all of those people, because there was anywhere from a dozen to 50 people around.
Oh, wow.
And, we were living in Vermont, living off of the land that we lived on. So we grew all of our own food. We raised all of our own animals. And that's like a hunger-inducing work. So it was like a full-time job for people to be cooking, and there was a pantry to match. So there was just enormous quantities of food. My dad actually ran the local co-op in town. And so we just had, bulk. Everything that we didn't grow came to us in bulk from that co-op. So as a kid, I was surrounded by these massive bins of flour and, whatever else was on hand, oats and this stuff, never sugar. But everything else. And so it was a bit of a playground. I mean, it was, either being outdoors or being in this kitchen. I think the very, very first thing I ever remember making, and this is so typical of the time, is it sounds like Little House on the Prairie, but we would pass around the butter churn.
Oh my
And I know,
gosh.
it's so crazy. And even the little kids would have their turn
Yeah.
at making the butter from
Yeah.
the cows, of course, that we had. So it was an unusual childhood in that there were so many people around, but it isn't that unusual in terms of like farmers or, you know, having a very similar existence. It's just we had way
Right.
more people to help.
Well, I think that that kind of lends to you knowing where the origin of your food come from, how it kind of comes to life at the grocery stores and all of that, things like that. I feel like it might give you a newer appreciation if you have to churn your own butter,
Yeah.
you know?
It's true, but you have to understand that, you know, for decades, really, I rebelled against it. I wanted,
Mm,
you know, I think it was my first day at kindergarten when I opened somebody else's or somebody else next to me opened their lunchbox and I saw a Twinkie for the first time.
mhm.
And like I said, we were not allowed to have sugar. So this was a revelation to me that these things existed, that sugar existed. My parents had told me
Mhm.
that raisins were candy. And
I read
so,
that.
yeah, so I mean, my world turned from this very sort of, you know, maybe unique, but very sort of earnest and wholesome upbringing, well, in
Mhm,
certain ways,
mhm.
to realizing that sugar existed and being obsessed with it. And so, you know, I've come back to an understanding of that and like wishing that I had been paying more attention. My dad raised bees and grew all of our food and he's a great gardener.
Oh,
I learned none of it because I wanted
mhm.
to, you know, see what the grocery store had. You know, I wanted white bread. I wanted fluff and utter sandwiches. And sugar cereal. I was obsessed with sugar cereal. So yeah,
Oh, yep.
later in life, I have such an appreciation for it, and you know, turned around and raised my boys without sugar for the longest time. But we rebel.
Did they rebel against you?
Well, I wasn't as strict about it, that's for sure.
Okay,
And
okay.
so, yeah, I mean, I think you know, as kids do, they go through. My kids have an amazing palate. I mean, they will eat anything, anything. But they definitely both went through the ramen phase where they ate nothing but
Mm,
ramen. And that
mhm.
was a
It's a rite
rebellion.
of passage.
It broke my heart, but I understood.
How funny is that? I feel like, though, this is my personal opinion, when you raise kids and restrict them completely, like 100%, that's just going to make them want to do it all the more.
Of course.
Like, if I had no candy and I knew it existed, I would do anything to get that candy if I was like a 5-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. It was, well, I mean, I guess I should be grateful because it, you know, it spurred on my obsession with it. And
Mhm.
if I was going to have those things, I had to do it myself, which is why I learned how to
Right.
bake.
What do your parents, because they were kind of restrictive when you were young, what do they think of your career now and the complete flip-flop?
Well, but many things I came to learn many, many years later, probably decades later, from my mom's best friend that she herself had a bit of a Twinkie thing.
Oh, it comes full circle.
And so I guess I came by it honestly. She never let that be known to me until many
Mhm.
decades later when I called her out on it. But yes, so you know, I think they were, you know, my parents are very supportive of what I do, and they always have been. And my
Mhm.
route has been a little bit unusual. I left college to start a cookie company,
Right.
and they were always very supportive of that. My mom was a dancer. My dad worked in publishing, but was
Oh, so they're
yeah,
creatives.
they're creatives. They were
Yeah.
hippies, and so
Mhm.
not much surprised them, you know? Um, yeah, so I think, in terms of the sugar, I don't know that my dad's ever really understood.
Hmm.
Because he still he lives in in the city, and he taps the maple trees on his boulevard, which is honestly
Wow.
illegal.
I hope no one listens to this about the maple
I know.
syrup.
And they've come by before while he's doing it, and they're like, "Sir, you know you're not allowed to do that." And he's like, "Really?" He had no idea. He assumes maple tree, maple syrup. I gotta have it. And they just sort of turn a blind eye at this kooky old man. But he raises bees for honey. He taps his city trees for maple syrup. So, I mean, he loves the things I bake, but in his heart, I still don't eat sugar.
Parents believe what they need
Yeah,
to believe.
exactly.
Pure denial.
Exactly.
I wouldn't think that, honestly, tapping maple trees would be illegal either. So,
Yeah, technically
I mean,
they're
I
the
get it.
city's trees. I think that might be the issue.
Oh,
But he has
that's hilarious.
he taps them all the way down the street. So he has his tubing that collects the
Oh
sap,
my gosh.
and it's hilarious. And he makes, out of all the gallons of sap that he gets, he probably gets a quart of maple syrup.
That is so
I know, it's
funny.
really hilarious.
You grew up in Vermont,
Yeah.
right? So he's in Vermont.
I actually followed him here to Minnesota. My husband and
Okay. I
I.
was gonna say Vermont would be perfect.
Yes, Vermont. Yeah, and I have a feeling in Vermont they're used to people tapping every maple tree, so it's probably not illegal.
It's state by state,
Yeah,
probably.
exactly. Check your city ordinance before you tap your trees.
I'll ask. I'm in California, so I'll ask the Secretary of State.
Yes.
When you started baking, what I actually find interesting is around 8 or 9 years old is when people in the culinary industry start to gain that kind of interest,
Yeah.
which is just a trend I've seen. So
Interesting.
I wonder if there's like science behind that.
Yeah.
But when you started baking in your household, did your parents help out, or was this kind of a one-woman operation?
Well, there was a lot of benign neglect going on the commune. So there was always people around, but was somebody in charge? I'm not sure. So I more remember I had a friend named Sasha who lived on many of the communes with me. And we would pretty much help ourselves to the pantry. I think 8 or 9 is when you have enough sort of physical and mental coordination to put things together and turn them into something resembling edible. And so I think that at that, because we were, at 3, we were throwing things together and stirring them together in the bathtub. But obviously that was not, that was just a physical, like, ooh, this is fun. At 8 or 9, we were doing it because we wanted to eat the thing. We were thinking we were making something delicious. Rarely did it turn out that way, but we were putting things, and I don't recall any adults being active in the oven situation either, which I don't recommend and I wouldn't have done with my own children. But these were different times. We also didn't have seatbelts. So, there's a lot of things that went on in the 70s that don't happen anymore. But yeah, there was a lot of experimenting. I think it was about that time. It turned out that what we were making was a Dutch baby, or a puffy, we called them puffy pancakes. And so we would put it into the pan, stick it in the oven, and just sit at the oven door and watch this thing rise and then try to explode it.
I've done that a time or two with things like, Peeps.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
When you would put them in the microwave and they would just.
Yes, exactly.
I have a fond memory of doing that. Puffy pancakes were one of my early childhood things that I used to make for my family. Now that I'm thinking about that.
That's awesome.
I totally forgot. That unlocked my brain a little bit. then your first job was at Ben and Jerry's as an ice cream cake maker, which, by the way, that sounds like a dream job.
Yeah. Well, okay. That was my first entry into pastry. My very first restaurant job was actually Wendy's.
Oh, really?
Did I not put that in my bio?
I didn't see it, but maybe I skipped
may have skipped that on my resume. Yeah. So
hey, you have to have roots.
I worked at Wendy's. I was in charge of the salad bar and the Frosties. So I guess that was sort of pastry.
Ooh. Frosties are good.
Frosties were awesome at the time. And then in college, I worked at Ben and Jerry's, and that was amazing. One, the ice cream was incredible. I wasn't a great or fast scooper, so they put me into the cake making and decorating, and that's where I was just like, what? This is a thing? Like, they gave me a pastry bag. I did not know what to do with the pastry bag, but it was fun. It was really fun. Those first cakes were just a hot mess. And I should really apologize to anybody that received one. But I did get better over time, and it was so much fun. The crazy thing about working at Ben and Jerry's at the time is that we got to take home 2 pints of ice cream for every shift.
That's dangerous.
It was so dangerous. At the time, I didn't quite realize. My boyfriend, now husband, I think gained 45 pounds while I was working there.
That's why I never, because I am a ice cream fanatic, I never stepped into a Dairy Queen to put in an application, and I never will.
Yeah. No. It was, I mean, I had been around it all day, so I had no interest, but I'd come home with those pints and I'd be like, where are they? And he'd have eaten 1 pint in a sitting.
Oh, yeah. It's so easy to do. That's why I can't even buy it anymore. It's a once every few months kind of deal.
Exactly.
I wonder, though, is Ben and Jerry's cake process, are all the decorations kind of similar? Like, it's one-step process that they have you do, or can you kind of get your creative juices flowing?
Well, you have to remember that this is in the 80s. So the process that they have now resembles nothing. I mean, they basically sat me in that room. I made the cakes. They gave me a piping bag, and I did whatever I wanted.
And you went for it?
Oh, okay. I am sure that there is a system. I mean, because at the time, Ben and Jerry still owned it and ran it, and would even show up. So yeah, it's I'm sure that they have a system, and that they, people come in and actually are taught how to do it and aren't made to figure it out. Yeah.
Well, hey, it probably cemented your love for pastry in the dessert sphere, right? So,
I'm super grateful it was as, sort of lackadaisical as it was. But I'm sure as a company, they're grateful they have a system now.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. They're on top of it. But for you, it was really great.
Yeah, for me, it was perfect.
Mm-hmm. And then did you start the cookie company while you were working there?
Yes, it was right around the same time, because I was in college at UVM. The cookie company came out of a business class that I had taken, and I had to fulfill a math requirement. And so I took this business class. And the professor assigned a business plan. So we had to write a fictitious business plan. And at the time, it was Mrs. Fields Cookies and David's Cookies and Famous Amos. And so I did a business plan based on Zoe's Cookies. I guess as I was finishing up the business plan, I realized that business sounded like a lot more fun than sitting in that class. So I dropped out of school and started the company.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I probably learned more from doing that than I did sitting in the classroom.
Oh yeah.
The business was a success in that I didn't lose any money. And so I recouped
Hey, that's success.
I had taken out a bank loan. This was another piece of advice that this professor gave me was take out a bank loan, don't spend it and pay it off so that you build up credit. Well, I spent it on this company, which was not his advice. But I did make enough money to pay it off and learned a lot. Mostly that I did not know how to bake.
Who were your customers? Was it other students?
Oh no. It was students, but I set up
Okay.
it was in Burlington, Vermont, and I set up on Church
Okay.
Street, which is a pedestrian walking only
Oh,
street, and I had a little cart that my husband, well, he was my boyfriend at the time, built
okay.
me. It was
Oh.
adorable and had little striped awning, and I would wheel that out, bake all night, wheel my cart out
Mhm.
onto Church Street, and just stand there. And it was mostly the business owners from around the area that would come out and buy cookies and all of
Oh
their
wow.
customers. So I had a great location because there was so much walking traffic. And
Oh.
some days the cookies were amazing, and some days they were not. I still
That's
have
so
all of
funny.
those recipes. And in fact, I just finished writing my 10th cookbook, which is Zoë Bakes Cookies. And
I was gonna
so,
ask you about that.
yeah. And so I've been really thinking about that time a lot recently, and I'm so pleased that all of these years later that I've come full circle and the cookies are a lot better.
I'm sure you know all the tips and
Yeah,
tricks now. Gotta
exactly.
apply them.
I've come a long way in my baking.
Was it more traditional cookies, like chocolate chip kind of thing, or were these like out of the box kind of thing?
Well, they were okay, so they were out of the box for the time, but you have to
Right.
understand
Okay.
that like adding white chocolate and macadamia nuts was like, what? People, and
Crazy. Hmm.
now people want things like rye flour or buckwheat or these things. I
Hmm.
was trying to get away from that because that's all I ever had growing up. And so
Right.
they were out of the box for the time, but not for now. You know what I
Okay. Yeah.
mean?
Now we have like the wackiest cookies you could think
Yeah.
of: savory, sweet, wild,
Yes,
wild things.
exactly. Exactly. So, at the time, this was, people were just realizing that there was something a little bit more than Toll House chocolate chip cookies. And
Mm.
so anything else that you did to them were a little bit wild for the times.
Hmm. Did you ever watch that Friends episode where they were looking for the Nestle Toll House recipe the entire time?
No, no.
You have to watch that
I'll
one.
have to look
It's
for
pretty
it.
funny. Basically, one of the characters, their grandma left a recipe for them, and it was like this chocolate chip cookie recipe. They couldn't find it anywhere. They made so many cookies to try to match the flavors, and it ended up just being a Nestle Toll House
Well,
recipe.
I mean, it's the hilarious thing is that I inherited my grandmother's recipe box, and all of these
Okay.
cookies that I had remembered from my childhood because she was the only person where I was allowed to have sugar at her house. So,
Oh, so she was your
yeah,
favorite.
so I would go to her house for the holidays, and she made like dozens of cookies, and I was allowed to have sugar cereal at her house. So, but then I
Ooh.
inherited her recipe box, and some of the recipes she tweaked, but some of them were straight out of Betty Crocker. And those were the times that,
Those are
yeah,
good though.
they were
Hmm.
delicious, but I'm pretty sure every household had those same exact cookies. And so it
I
totally
can
makes
picture
sense
it.
to me that that episode of Friends, they'd be, grandma's cookies were Toll House or Betty
Toll
Crocker.
House. When you said Betty Crocker, my mom still has the giant book
Yeah.
that has all of those recipes, and I look through it when I'm home because she puts her other recipes in it
Yeah.
too, and I'm like, this is such a
I
classic
have my
household thing.
grandmother's from the 50s, and it has like, I can see where she set down the 8-inch chocolate cake pan, because there's a ring of chocolate on the page and it's just stained. I think she made every recipe out of that book.
Oh my gosh, you have to. It's a rite
Yeah,
of passage, I think.
exactly.
So you went to the CIA, and then during that time you were offered a job as Andrew Zimmern's pastry assistant, which I didn't know.
Yes, yeah. So,
That is so cool. How did that
well,
come about?
my husband and I moved to Minnesota. I was working at an ad agency, and just not happy is, not a strong enough vision of it. And I would come home and I would bake and cry and bake and cry. And he said, "Why don't you go to culinary school? You love to bake." So I actually went to the local, just like the local college here, community college,
Okay.
and took some classes and was like, "This is it. This is where I've always meant to be." They weren't making the food that I wanted, so that's how I ended up at the CIA, was because I wanted,
Okay.
I just wanted a different type of food. But I left my husband and dogs here in Minnesota and went out to New York to do that. And then
That's a big
it
step.
was huge. It was huge. And then my professor said, "There's somebody in Minnesota looking for a pastry assistant. You should talk to them." And so I talked to Andrew over the phone for about 3 minutes, took the job, left school, which seems to be a habit of mine. Went back to Minnesota and realized that I had just taken a job with one of the craziest and most brilliant people I know. And I
That's a
learned
great way to
again,
describe him.
I went to culinary school because I wanted the foundation. Like, I wanted to understand the techniques, and baking is a bit of food science. There's a lot more artistry and a lot more play in it than people give credit, but you do have to understand some of the very basics of how things go together in order to have a higher ratio of success. And
Right.
that's why I wanted to go to culinary school. And so I got that bit of foundation. And then the real education comes in working in a professional kitchen or a bakery, or wherever else, whatever
Right.
avenue of it you want to do. And so I learned so much. The other thing I learned from Andrew, because this was before he was ever on TV, was,
I was going to ask you that. I wasn't sure if this was
so
before he.
we would go to lunch and he would bring his giant camcorder. Do you even know what that is? It was
I think I do. Yeah,
it was
one of
a
those.
camera that was like this big, and it had like a big huge strap that you could put around your neck, and he would hold it up and videotape himself eating lunch, and we all thought he was just nuts, but he was practicing. He knew he wanted to be on TV. He was putting in his 10,000 hours, not only as a chef but as on camera. And this was like before cell phones or mobile phones or any of that. So people weren't videotaping themselves 100% of the time.
He was ahead of his time, man.
He was so ahead of his time. We thought he was just crazy. And he was a genius. I mean, he really, and he did it. He went for it. And so watching that process and watching his understanding of not only the craft of cooking, but also making a living at it. Because at the time, cooking was not a career where people made money. It was a labor of love. And so he had a different take on it all. And that was really fascinating to watch.
Right. And especially growing up not in that space at all, and then doing a total 180 and having hands-on experience and someone who also believes in you and is reaching for the stars per se.
Yeah, he always said that I would be on TV, and I always thought, again, that he was crazy.
He knew. He had a knack.
He did. He knew it. And he was very confident about the whole thing. And I was just like, you are nuts. So
Mhm.
it took many decades to get there, but he was right.
My grandma always said I was going to be a senator, but I squashed that dream real quick.
Wow, that's amazing. You never know. You're very young.
Never knew.
It could still happen. I mean, I didn't get on TV until I was 50. So there's a lot of time to
Yeah, I was wondering that because I feel like I don't know why I assumed because you're so like jovial and just so meant for TV. I was like, I didn't realize that Zoë Bakes only started 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Or 2 years ago. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the whole thing, this whole ride, this next part of my career started when my kids were teenagers. Because I was a couple of things. I was a stay-at-home mom and I wrote cookbooks. And so I was able to stay at home with them because I was writing cookbooks and I could do that from home. And then when they were teenagers, I realized they had no idea I was a pastry chef. They knew that I baked for them and I would bake them these wild cakes and, I would do things at the holidays, but they didn't know me as a working person. Oh. And I was really, I realized at that moment, not only did I want them to see me as that person, but I also wanted it back for myself. I was like, it's my turn. I've raised these 2 boys. Tag you're it. you have all, at that age, the parents have very little impact on who they're going to be. They're going to be their own people.
Right.
And so I decided that I wanted to do my thing. And previous to that, when I was home with the boys, I was writing a series of bread books, Artisan Bread in 5 Minutes a Day. And my co-author, Jeff Hertzberg, and I wrote 8 of them.
Whoa.
I know. And I really, that was a train ride because they did very, very well. We've sold about 1 million copies.
Wow.
But it was really only one dimension of my baking. And so I decided that I wanted to do a pastry series. And so I took off and did that. And then the pandemic hit and Instagram became a very important place for me because we were all isolated. I started doing Instagram live videos with my sons who were home.
Oh, how cute.
It was such a blast. And it was the first time I was in front of the camera. And I was so comfortable because I was home. I was with my boys. It was just like, it just felt, and I was, with the community that I had, met on Instagram. And so it just felt easy. And when I did that, I was approached by production companies and they asked me if I was interested in doing TV. And so that's how it came. It was sort of this organic thing. It wasn't something I had set out to do. And Andrew owns a production company all these years later. So full circle again. He said, "Are you ready?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's try this." So that's how it happened.
Wow, that's so full circle. That seems like a really meant to be kind of scenario too. And it's hard to step in front of the camera when you're not used to it, especially with your background. And it wasn't really like a known thing. And now all of a sudden everyone's in front of the camera.
Yeah. It's, these days you almost have to add that to your skill set. It's not enough to be a baker or a, whatever else you are doing, even an accountant. There are, YouTube channels of accountants describing what they do. And so I feel like everybody, like my boys, just have grown up comfortable in front of a camera. They're not always as comfortable on my show as they are on their own,
Well, that's a big production. It's a little
right?
different.
It's so funny. They, I think they enjoy doing it, but they get, as people do. And my husband refuses. He just flat out refuses to be on the show. But
Wow. Is it a nerves thing, or he just doesn't want to do the camera thing?
We have a great big old house, and on the third floor is a ballroom. And he's turned that into his office, and he goes up there with the dogs and locks himself in while the cameras are here. And he won't even come down for, like, he's scared they might mistakenly catch him on camera.
I get that. Not everyone is meant to be behind
I totally respect it.
Yeah, I respect that a lot too. So you weren't nervous for your first show? You kind of felt like you were totally ready, or were there some nerves when you began?
Well, that's a good question, because the very first project that I did with Andrew's production company was a series of classes, like online classes.
Oh, you were teaching.
Okay. And that's my comfort zone. Like, I would say teaching is now the thing that I love the most. I love baking, and I do that every waking moment that I can. But the thing that brings me the most satisfaction is teaching other people how to bake, because I think baking in particular is very intimidating to people. And so when I see someone have that, like, oh, I can do this, and not only can I do it, but it's really fun, that's the thing that, like, gets me going. And so we did this series of classes, and because I was just doing the thing that I love to do, I kind of forgot about the camera. And so we did a series of those classes, and I really liked it. And they wanted to pitch a show. And then I found out that Chip and Joanna were starting their own network, and I was like, that's where I want to be. Like, I loved.
Did you know them previously?
No, I mean, I knew their show. I didn't know them personally, but I knew their show, and I loved that their show was about their craft and their love of their craft and presenting that. And it wasn't them pretending to be anything other than themselves. You know what I mean? They weren't a character. They weren't, like, trying to do, they weren't entertaining us other than entertaining us because they're so good at what they do. And so I loved this sort of authenticity of what they were creating. And I was like, that's where I want to be, because I'm not an actress. And so I needed to be able to be myself.
Right. I mean, you're a pastry chef. You're not supposed to be an actress. You didn't go into that field.
But I feel like there's a lot of, they had sent my, what they call a sizzle. So it's the audition tape. They had sent it to other networks, and the feedback that I got was, okay, who are you going to be? Like, what's your character? Who's this? What's the storyline? And I was like, And Magnolia just let me do the things that I love to do and tell the stories that I wanted to tell. So it was just like the perfect scenario.
Right. I think you do in certain food shows, you have to be theatrical to a point. I mean, you have to be enthusiastic, you have to be enticing. That kind of is part for the course, but, like, to kind of change the arc of your personality, that's not really natural.
Yeah.
And I feel like that would be really difficult, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, and I feel like viewers would be able to see that, and there are people who are both talented actors, and now you see it on, on the Food Network. They have actual celebrity, like, actors who have food shows. So, I mean, that's, if they can do all of that, that's amazing.
More power to them.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
power to
Yeah,
him. Andrew as well. He's wonderful on TV, but
brilliant.
I've spoken to him a few times just over the phone for like interviews and stuff, and he's so funny. He's the same.
He's hilarious. Oh my. So we just did this holiday special for
I saw it. It
Magnolia.
looks so fun.
We had such a blast. It was hilarious. I just like Patrick was the director for the show. And
Mhm.
I mean, the man worked for a living on that to keep us on the rails.
That's the best kind of show, though.
We were just it was unstoppable. We had such a blast. I hope we get to do more. I don't
I
know.
love
I
that.
don't know that Patrick has recovered.
Yeah, you recovered. Were you guys cooking on that? Was that
Yeah.
like what was the premise what's the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
premise of that? Is that
We
edited?
got together. So I've known Andrew for nearly 30 years. And we've
Okay.
done just about everything but throw a party together. You know,
Mhm.
just like in our homes. Obviously, we've done it in restaurants and in public places, but just like our own personal party. So he came
Mhm.
over and we cooked together and created. I mean, it was a little over the top, but it's the holidays, so it's meant to be.
Mhm.
And we just had, I won't give it all away because you can still watch
Yeah.
it, stream it. But he whipped out a surprise that there was laughing and crying.
Oh my gosh, I'm excited to
Yeah,
watch
yeah,
it. Now
yeah.
I
It was
have to know.
really fun. I really loved it.
The ultimate teaser. I love holiday baking things.
So you love holiday things?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
holiday baking things is
Yeah.
so fun. I've been watching like videos of TikToks and all
Yeah.
this stuff. I was watching some of yours and just going through all the pastries. I'm like, I'm so
Yeah.
excited.
It's so fun. I know. And this is the time of year too where I feel like people take on big projects and I love that. Like everybody
Mhm.
loves a super simple throw it together, one bowl, get it in the oven, have something delicious. But then there's also just the fun of taking on a project and having the details and
Mhm.
and doing something it's almost like craft, where you're putting
It
something
is.
together and then you have this beautiful thing at the end. So I love both of those.
Oh, I love it. I love it. We do these like gingerbread houses every year, and then I have like a whole cookie day going on.
Yes.
The gingerbread houses, I end up getting tired, so they never turn out
Ah!
what I plan in my head.
Well, one of the things that I do in the show is I make, because my house is yellow, I do it out of sugar cookie instead of gingerbread cookie, but I
Oh,
recreate my
cute.
house out of cookie. Um, and I
Oh my
basically
gosh, does that take forever?
It takes a while, but I have it down because I do it every year.
Okay.
And I also inherited the blueprints of the house, so I can really get kind of precise. I mean,
Oh
this is
my
a
gosh.
crazy, over the top, bonkers thing to do. But it's so much fun. It's so much fun. But just, that kind of project is like, I love it. And Andrew helped me with it,
Oh,
which was hilarious.
oh, he
Yeah.
did? Wait, do you do the inside too? Like, are there people in
Oh,
it?
one year I put people in the windows. I didn't this year, but that's such a good idea. Next year.
Okay.
So, yeah, or some year it'll just be life size, and we'll just do the party in that cookie house. We'll do it on
Oh my
set.
gosh.
I'll need Chip and
Do life
Joanna for
size.
that.
Yeah, yeah. If you do life size, I want to be in the audience.
That would be amazing.
Because you've been behind the camera so many times now, do you have any kitchen mishaps or pastry
Oh yeah,
mishaps or
they
anything?
should do a bloopers reel of all the things.
What happened to
Yeah,
those?
what happened to those? It should be at
They're
the
the best
end of
part.
every episode. They should show the like reality of behind the scenes. Oh
Uh-huh.
yeah, it happens all the time. Where like you throw the broiler on and you walk away and You've incinerated whatever you're making, or you turn the mixer on high and there's just a, a bomb of flour all over the kitchen. Yeah, totally happens.
I feel like I always make a mess without intending to.
Yeah.
Like every ingredient I put in, I'm just like, I spill it somehow, I do something. Last night I literally made brownies and the cocoa powder got everywhere. I was like, how did I even do this?
I was on the Today Show. It was a virtual thing. So I was home and I make my own homemade vanilla, and I do it in these big, huge jars, just threw it, like it just like flew out of my hand, smashed onto the ground. It didn't break. And I just like seamlessly picked it up and kept going. But it's like, this is not the time you want to be throwing your 10-year-old bottle of vanilla on the floor. So yeah, I mean, it totally happens. And your hands are covered in butter, and it's just like,
That was a live taping?
It was live. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was live. So I'm just like, I got to pick it up. Here I am.
If it's spilled, they'd just be like, cut.
No, they just would have they just went with it. They're like, oops. So yeah.
I actually know, when you said the homemade vanilla, I remember a part of me and Annie's conversation where she said that you told her to make homemade vanilla, and now she does it. Yeah. It takes a while.
It takes a while, but it's so good. It's, I feel like it's one of those kitchen moves that everybody has to do. You just have to plan ahead. And yeah, I mean, it's just vanilla beans and vodka, and you put them together and let them, sit together so that it really ripens into a beautiful extract. And it does take time, and it takes a lot of vanilla beans, but it's so good. And then there's a super simple hack if you already have store-bought pure vanilla. It really wouldn't make a ton of sense to do this in an artificial vanilla extract, but you can just take a vanilla bean, split it, scrape the seeds out, and put it into your store-bought vanilla, and then you'll add all of that extra flavor from the beans to it. Yeah, so you can just augment store-bought vanilla with that, but while you're letting your homemade rest into perfection.
Oh, okay. Vanilla is like one of my favorite ingredients. It just smells so good. You can't use a lot of it, but
yeah, it's not one of those things where I typically make something just vanilla. You know what I mean? Like, it's, for me, it's more of a base flavor. It's like salt. You would never bake something without salt, but it shouldn't necessarily be salty. It's just that it makes everything else taste even better. And so that's how I think of vanilla as well.
That's interesting. I've never really thought of it that way. That makes a lot of sense. What's one of your favorite recipes that you've made on the show to date or on air?
Oh, wow.
That's a big question.
There's so many.
There's so many.
So like I said before, like some of these things are super fast, go together super quickly. And then there's projects. They let me do the thing that I loved about creating the show and doing it with Magnolia is they let me do these projects. So because they're used to building houses, so it seems like nothing to them.
That's fair.
So I did on one episode for New Year's Eve, I did a croquembouche, which is, cream puffs. Ooh. And it's like this tower of cream puffs. Yeah. And then I did spun sugar around it. And it was just so much fun. It's just such a fun thing. And then the other thing that I always love is doing meringue and then whipping out the blowtorch and torching it. If I can get a blowtorch in every episode, I would.
Zoe and a blowtorch.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe welding will be my next show.
Yeah. Next, that could be do it. Pitch it to Chip and
Yeah,
Joanna. Maybe they'd be on
exactly. I'll
board.
come on and
They're
weld for them.
builders.
Hilarious.
How funny. I actually have a fun question. So, because you've been a judge on Silo's baking competition and Chopped Sweets you were on, do you think that do you find that for yourself that there's a lot of distinctions between hosting and judging a show?
Oh, yeah. I think it's, like for me, the joy of doing Zoë Bakes is in not only telling the stories, but also teaching people. Like I was very excited that they let me walk people through a recipe so that people could actually do it. That they could, because I'm a recipe developer as well. And so for a recipe developer, the best thing is when people make your recipes. And so I really wanted a component of being able to teach people how to do these things. Judging these competition shows is so different because I'm tasting all of these delicious things, but it's interacting in a very different way. And I'm judging somebody's baking, which is, counterintuitive to a baker who just wants everybody to love each other and be happy and eat delicious things. So the Silos one was so great because there was it's like the Great British Bake Off, there's just this feeling that is so true to bakers, that everybody was just there really to bake and have a good time, and everybody loved each other, and Annie was like off helping other people or visiting, and there wasn't this like cutthroat competition, which is something that makes me so anxious.
And so, it makes me anxious watching it.
Yeah, I know. Just from watching, I would never be a competitor. No. I say that and then watch, I'll probably do one. But this was like tailor-made for me. When they asked me to do it, I'm like, I don't know. It's like, I don't want people to be fighting. And they're like, no. This is like, these are bakers. And it totally, I loved it. I loved that show.
Yeah, it definitely depends on the ambiance of the show. Because if it's like, go, like they have to do in 15 seconds, that's stressful to watch. And then to judge it, it's like, how do you judge someone who did this in 15 seconds?
Yeah, I think the craziest thing about the Silos one is that we were outside in Texas. And so who knows what the weather is going to be? It could be 1,000 degrees or it could be like windy or, so that I feel like was the pressure point.
Right. I cannot stand sweating, let alone doing it on camera in a competition.
Exactly.
Worst nightmare.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so this is the actual fun question, which is kind of a segue to you saying you would never be a competitor, but we'll see when you answer. Okay. What is one food or baking show that you would like to be on? It could be any show. As a judge, contestant, or host.
Oh, okay. So I would say the Great British Bake Off. I mean, I think that's the original competition show where I was like, oh, this is delightful. This is like, like I said, this captures the essence of bakers. And that's the original one. So I think I actually auditioned for the American version, but didn't.
Really?
Yeah, but didn't, as a judge, but didn't really understand. I didn't understand the industry at the time. So they said, come to the audition. It was a Zoom audition. Come to the audition, camera ready. And I thought they meant like have your camera on. I didn't realize they meant hair and makeup.
Oh.
And so I come on. There's a panel of like 8 producers on the other end of this Zoom call. And they're like, are you ready? And I'm like in a t-shirt, just like in my regular, cooking outfit. And they're like, okay.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I learned a thing or two on that too.
That is so
I
funny.
know,
Honestly,
I know.
well, now you know.
Like,
Lesson
it's
learned.
hilarious. I know. I called Andrew after that and I was like, I think I blew that. Oh, that's hilarious.
You didn't. You didn't. It's okay. It was practice for
Yes.
your next
It's
really
all
cool thing that you're gonna do.
practice. And this, okay, so that in a nutshell is baking. It's all practice. Like people
Mhm.
expect to get something perfect the first time. And it's like you have to enjoy the process of getting there.
Right.
And perfection is like not really part of the equation. It's like just
No,
practice
it's
and
not.
each time it's going to get better but having fun doing it is the most important part. And you
Mhm.
can taste that.
Yeah, I agree. Cooking, pretty much cooking is a similar way as well. It took me a while to make chocolate chip cookies that were actually good. I would over bake them for some
Yeah.
reason. Maybe I just didn't pay attention to the cooking time. I don't know what it was,
Yeah,
but
and everybody's so individual because some people want a super crispy cookie and some people want a soft
right,
one. And so it's like what your perfect cookie is will be somebody else's, you know, they'll want something entirely different.
right, right. I remember you said to me, okay, this actually stuck out to me. Like literally a year and a half later, you were like, read the recipe all the way through.
Yes. Oh,
So
good.
simple, but I was so, since you told me that, I was like, I have to read it through now
Wow,
because
that's
I would never have
great.
told the
That is,
ingredients.
I think, my number one piece of advice to people because it seems so obvious, and yet
Hmm.
people don't do that. And then they're surprised in the middle that they need a piece of equipment or they, need the
Hmm.
temperature of their butter to be a certain thing. And so just a quick
Right.
read through will really take all the surprises out of the recipe.
Yeah, it's the butter that gets me. I always forget to take it
Yes,
out. That's my
you
one
are
thing.
not alone. We all do it.
Is there one common baking mistake, especially with you getting so many questions for the
Yeah.
holidays, that just drives you crazy or anything that you can mention?
Okay, so there's a couple of things that come to mind. The first one is the one we just talked about is temperature. Temperature is very important
Mhm.
for ingredients. So like you said, read through the recipe and know what the temperature of the ingredients should be. The second thing is making
Mhm.
substitutions. When you substitute
Yeah.
something in a recipe, you're really changing the recipe. And so it's fine to do it. You just have to realize that you've entered into an experiment. And so you have to understand that it may not come out looking exactly like the picture or tasting exactly like the description. And some
Mhm.
things are more easily substituted than others. But like I said, it's great because you might invent something absolutely fantastic. But you just have to
Mhm.
level set your expectations once you do that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm always looking up substitutes for
Yeah.
everything because I don't always have all the
Yeah.
ingredients. But you're right. You do have to realize that that will change the
Yep.
outcome at least
Yep.
slightly. Even if it's not a
Yeah.
big change,
Yep.
it's gonna do a little bit. The other day, I feel like it's always like milk is something that I always end up certain milks like heavy
Mm,
cream if it needed whatever kind of
yeah.
that. Butter too. For butter, what butter do you normally use most often in baking?
Well, because I'm developing recipes for people, I try to use a butter that's readily available. And so I will
Okay.
get, Land O'Lakes is probably the most common one locally here, but Kirkland
Hmm.
from Costco, or I'll try to use something that I feel like everybody nationally can find. If I'm using a butter like Kerrygold or a different European style butter, I'll name that in the recipe because it really will change. There's so much more fat content in those butters that it really might
Right.
change the recipe. And so I'll name the butter if I'm using something like that.
Okay, yeah, because I know Kerrygold is just it's slightly more expensive, at least in
Yep.
my
Yep.
area. but I know a lot of bakers kind of swear by it, but I
Delicious.
don't know. I just never opted for that because it's not something I
Yeah,
have
and that's exactly
really.
right. I think people, the recipe has to work with the ingredients that most people can get a hold of. And also, it's
Mhm.
hard to require something that's much more expensive. There are
Mhm.
exceptions where it's just so much more delicious because Kerrygold in particular is one that I love to use because one, it's a European butter, and so the fat content is higher. And so you just get the textures can be just amazing. And also, you'll notice that Kerrygold
Okay.
is really yellow, and it's because the cows only
Yeah.
feed on grass. It's just a
Mhm.
delicious butter. But like you said,
It
it's
is.
expensive, so you want to save it for, special things and recipes that are written, with that kind of butter in mind.
Okay. For chocolate chip cookies, I could ask you like a million
Yeah,
questions, but this is
I'm gonna have
my
to,
last
I
baking.
know we're gonna have, I could talk to you all day, but I'm gonna have to cut
I
this
know.
off.
I know. I realized it's already been an hour.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, I have to let her go. She's so busy. What chocolate do you use in chocolate chip cookies?
Well, my go-to is Valrhona. I feel like for
Okay.
chocolate chip cookies, the chocolate's really important. Having said that, you use whatever chocolate excites you. You know what I mean? I think it's like
Mhm.
their chocolate is like wine or coffee or you know what I mean? It's like each
Mhm.
one tastes so different. And some people
Mhm.
like a really fruity, almost acidic chocolate, and other people like sweeter, mellower chocolate. There's no right or
Mhm.
wrong. The only thing that I would say is avoid coating chocolate because there's fats in that are meant to stay, solid, and it's a little bit waxy and not a
Mhm.
great baking chocolate.
Okay. Yes.
If you were doing something that was more decorative and you didn't intend to eat it, which I'm not sure why you would do it, but then you can
Mhm.
use that coating chocolate. Otherwise, I try to avoid it.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Chef Zach Young, who's on like Food
Yeah.
Network and stuff, he tempered
Yep.
chocolate and like coating chocolate. He hates like coating chocolate.
Coating chocolate. Yep. Coating chocolate, no good. Tempering
Yeah.
chocolate is a skill,
Recommends. Yeah.
one that's fun, and I recommend you learn how to do it. But that's something that takes some practice to do.
Mhm.
But yeah, and
Okay.
then you can do any couverture chocolate or like high quality chocolate and turn it
Love
into a
it.
really delicious coating chocolate.
Ugh, okay. I'm taking all these tips as I go into my cookie baking marathon with my
Yes.
mom. All right, so let's talk about what's next for you. Do you have any upcoming projects? Anything else you'd like to share? Anything going on? Maybe for 2024 is coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I'm mostly in right now is my new book. So the Zoe Bakes
Mhm.
cookies will be coming out in the fall of 2024. And so I'm
Yay.
so excited. This is a book that is over 30 years in the making for me.
Oh, I'm
Yeah, so
excited.
we've been talking about full circle. This is the one.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like cookies too are the thing that gets people excited to start baking, because I
Hmm.
think they are accessible to people and people have so many great memories of cookies from growing
Hmm.
up. And yeah, so I think I'm,
Nostalgic, yeah.
yeah, very nostalgic. And this book for me, it turned into almost like a biography because there's different cookies from different parts of my life. And so
Oh, cute.
it was really a fun and interesting book for me to write.
Oh, how
Yeah.
exciting. It'll commemorate your cookie
Yeah.
company from the beginning and all of that really fun
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
That is so cool. All right, I have my final question for you, which I ask every single guest. I'll skip over the game because I've kept you too long. If there is one baking appliance or utensil that you think everyone should splurge on, what would it be and why?
Okay, well, if it's a splurge, then I'm going to say a stand mixer. Just because if and when you get super into baking, it does so much of the work for you. It can whip egg whites. It can cream butter and sugar together. It can knead bread dough. So it's just one of those like workhorse appliances that really makes the game so much easier. Having said that, you don't absolutely have to have one, but for some recipes, it just will be a game changer.
Okay, I know. I need to invest in one so bad. I really do.
And
My
maybe you
mom
have
has
the
one and then I
space,
moved.
you know?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I don't have a ton of space.
Yeah.
So that's probably my downfall. Well, thank you so much. I literally could talk to you all day. Like, this was so fun, and I'm really, really happy you came on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. This has been delightful. I've really enjoyed it. And
You
happy
are
baking.
welcome anytime. Oh, yeah. Happy baking. I won't flood you with too many holiday questions. I'm sure you're getting a million.
Oh, no. I love it. I love it.
All right. So you can follow Zoe on Instagram at Zoë Bakes or check out her newsletter on zoebakes.com. Then you can watch Zoë Bakes and stream it wherever you stream your episodes. Hey, fellow foodies. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to leave me a review. And while you're at it, make sure to follow me at Livvin for Food Pod on Instagram or TikTok, or email me at livvinforfoodpod@gmail.com. Let me know what you're cooking up this week, which guests you would like to see on the podcast, or tell me your opinions on the latest viral food trend. Until next time.